This is a situation where we have two people in a very intense, emotionally charged argument one night, and only one of them comes out of that argument. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Philpott and I cover true crime and missing person cases on my channel. The case we're covering today is a missing person case, but the certainty in the victim's family that she is no longer alive is overwhelming. And again, similarly to my last video, this is a case that I had never heard of. And the only reason I know about it at all is because it was requested. And this is why I love when you guys comment your requests. Like, if there's a case you want me to cover, please let me know. You could then be the reason that the case reaches even just a few more people. Sometimes in true crime, that's all that's required to make serious impact. All right, let's have a look at this case. This is the case of Dee Warner. This case is based in Lenawee County, Michigan. Not the first case we've covered from Lenawee County, Michigan, but we'll get to that later. And Dee Warner was a spunky 52-year-old woman who was described by her family as fierce, yet incredibly loving and caring. She really loved looking after herself in terms of how she was presenting herself. Like, she would love having her hair done, having her makeup done, getting dressed up all the time, even if she wasn't going anywhere special. And I don't know why true crime cases always seem to be based around somebody who's described as the life of the party, but Dee really was. She was extroverted, she was her happiest when she was around people, and people loved having her around as well. And these traits of fierce and extroverted, these really lended themselves well to entrepreneurship. She had multiple family members in business, and it honestly just made sense for her to go into business as well. So she owned multiple businesses, not even just one, in agriculture and trucking. This woman was a powerhouse. Unfortunately though, something that goes along with being a powerhouse of a woman can often be wanting to fix everything yourself and not really wanting to admit if something is going wrong or if there's a problem that you're in over your head with. And this definitely applied to Dee because she just never wanted to be seen as incapable or weak or anything like that. So Dee was married to a man called Dale Warner. They got married in 2006 and they had quite an interesting relationship, not necessarily in a good way. And it was actually more described as like a business relationship more than anything. And they did eventually go into business together. But even their wedding, like, it was very over the top and elegant and fancy and all this stuff, but it wasn't a wedding where you go to and you cry. Not that I could ever go to a wedding and not cry, but anyway. And their marriage, from the word go, was described as tumultuous. But things were complicated because after a few years of being together, Dale and Dee had a child together. They had a little daughter called Angelina. Now, both Dee and Dale had children from previous marriages, and those children were now adults. And although things were never blissfully happy and magical between Dee and Dale, she definitely tried to keep it together for Angelina. In the meantime, let's get into Dee's disappearance. It all starts on Saturday, the 24th of April, 2021. And actually, the day I'm filming this is the 25th of April, 2023. So today, 2 years ago, is the day that Dee was reported missing. I don't know how that happens so often to me, but on this day, on the 24th of April, Dee had a very difficult day. She was extremely upset and anxious about something, which I'll explain now in a moment. But just before I do, I want to mention how people even found out that she was missing. The following day, on the 25th, Dee's daughter Raquel and her family arrived at Dee and Dale's home that day for Sunday breakfast. And this was something they did every single Sunday, and they arrived just after 9 a.m. But the strange thing was, Dee wasn't there, and neither was Dale, and neither was Angelina, which was a little weird if you have like set plans every single Sunday morning. But that didn't stop Raquel from just continuing on. She started making breakfast. She was like, well, you know, maybe they just popped out for something, who knows? Because technically they could be back any minute. With that said though, something still felt off. Regardless, they made breakfast, eventually they went home. So Raquel took it upon herself to text Dee. These two had a very close mother-daughter relationship, but this time Dee didn't respond. to Raquel's text. She also didn't answer the phone. All of this was just so unusual. She was never uncontactable. So things start to develop then. More family members are being told like, hey, have you seen Dee? Have you heard from Dee? So they all start trying to call her, and they realised that none of them had actually heard from her since the day before. Eventually Raquel and Dale got in contact, and Dale asked if Raquel had seen Dee, if she'd heard from her, and Raquel said, no, I was hoping you'd heard from her, which led to, damn, you should probably report her missing then, because none of us know where she is. And Dale said, yeah, I'll do that in the morning after I take Angelina to school. Red flag, anybody? Raquel and her other siblings rightfully were not happy with this response. They took it upon themselves to report Dee missing. As it happened, the searches began on that same day, and even Dee's family members took it upon themselves to go through the security footage from their multiple acre land and see if anything would raise alarm, but there was nothing. No vehicle came to pick her up. Dee didn't leave on foot. Dee didn't drive away herself. Let's put a pin in that, because I want to go back to the 24th. I want to explain just how anxious and upset she was that day, because something big was going to happen, and she knew that. First of all, we know that Dee loved getting dressed up and being put together and very well presented, so she actually had an eyelash appointment that day, but she was crying so much. The lash tech really struggled to actually get the eyelashes on her eyes because they were so swollen. Dee had also been vomiting that day because she was experiencing such emotional turmoil. But why was she so upset? I'm sure you're wondering that, because I certainly was. Well, she was so upset because that night she was going to tell Dale that she was leaving him. This was a 15-year marriage. They had businesses together. Like, she was literally ending it all that night. It's pretty clear what happened here then. But, you know, maybe the facts will change my mind, so let's keep going. And how do we know that Dee was actually going to have this conversation with Dale that night? She literally told Raquel that day, her daughter, that she was gonna have that conversation with him that night. And Raquel even asked her, do you think that your marriage could be fixed, or some of these problems could be solved by selling the company? To which Dee responded, my marriage is over, there is just no coming back from this. So there was no ifs or buts about it. Like, she was ending the marriage that night. In fact, the reason Angelina wasn't in the house was because Dee had also told a family friend that she was going to have this conversation tonight. And the family friend said, you know what, I'll take Angelina tonight. Things could get a little loud. You don't really want Angelina to witness that. Particularly because it was well known that Dee and Dale had quite an intense and tumultuous relationship. So it was a fact that this conversation was going to happen on this night, which just so happened to be the last night that Dee was ever seen by anyone ever. Immediately, alarm bells. Side note, Dee also made 2 additional eyelash appointments with her lash tech, which she obviously never got to go to. Okay, so just a couple of other little details at the house that day. Dee and Dale owned a Hummer, and since they had a farm, they also owned a tractor. And this Hummer that they had was literally sitting in the exact same spot for over a month. But on the morning Dee went missing, the Hummer was moved to just outside their office, which was about 100 feet from the house. The really weird thing about this was it wasn't seen on security cameras driving from the house to the office. So how would that have happened? Because you would have to drive in a very strange way to avoid all the cameras. And that would have been very difficult, but it would have had to be intentional. Like, you couldn't just do that by accident. And why would you do that on the morning that a person goes missing that lives there? Weird. Dee and Dale's tractor was also moved to outside the office and was also not seen being driven on the security cameras. Also weird. Then later that morning, the Hummer was moved back to where it had previously been sitting for over a month. So I'm sure you're wondering what Dale's side of the story was. Like, where was he? When was the last time he saw her? Like, what's his perspective on this? Forget about everything else for a sec. He was the last person to see her. The only other person that saw her that night was the family friend that came to pick up Angelina, which was around 7:42 p.m. And after that, Dale was the only person with her. So let's get into that. Okay. Initially, Dale said that he and Dee had had the worst fight of their life that night. But not long after this, he changed his story. And he said that actually, they had a little fight, but it wasn't that bad. And he ended up giving her a massage on the living room floor, and she fell asleep. So he picked her up and put her on the couch where she stayed for the night, and he went to bed. Then the following morning, he left the house at 6 a.m. and she was still there asleep and even snoring on the couch. That was the last time he ever saw her. And when the other family members asked Dale what he thought actually happened, he said something pretty interesting. He said she must be in Mexico or Jamaica. That's pretty specific, okay. He also said she must have run off with a guy that's richer than him because she was so interested in money. Okay. He also said that she could have run off with a rich man to Australia. And then another time later on, he said, no, actually she's in Arizona. Like, come on, man, like if you don't know what happened, you don't know where she is. And if you do have an inkling that she might be in Arizona or she might be in Mexico, give a reason. Don't just be like, yeah, like she's probably in Mexico. I thought you didn't know what happened to her. A little bit after she went missing, he also said that she left with her curling iron, travel bag or like makeup bag, her purse and her phone. Chris McDonough and Billy Little cover this case in a lot of detail in the Interview Room YouTube channel, so I'll link their page below if you want to dive a little deeper on this case. But they were talking about Dale knowing that Dee had taken a curling iron. They were like, if my wife left with a curling iron, I wouldn't have a clue. Like, I wouldn't notice that. Which is a really good point. Like, how did he know? How did he notice that the curling iron was gone? Unless where she normally keeps it is like out in the open and then suddenly it's gone, then sure. But that's just something interesting to think about. She also, if she did go to Mexico or wherever, she didn't take any clothes. And she's going, apparently, for the rest of her life. And like, to be honest, I can see that being the case if you just want to leave and disappear. And you know what? You can buy more clothes when you get to your location. You just want to travel light. But, I always find it super, super important to play devil's advocate in cases like this. I know some people don't agree with that. In the true crime world, there's a few reasons. There are people who get locked up for 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years for crimes they didn't commit. So it's really important not to jump on somebody just because they look a little off or they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, sometimes it's just there's a little too much against them. But anyway, one massive reason I love playing devil's advocate is if something is off, imagining for a moment that it's actually true just shows you how off it is. So if Dale was telling the truth, Dee would have had to wake up pretty instantly after Dale left at 6 a.m, even though when he left, she was like conked out, snoring and everything. She would have had to get up immediately and dispose of her phone in a place that nobody would ever find it. She would have to drive the Hummer to the office, walk back, drive the tractor to the office, leave her $50,000 wedding ring on Dale's desk because that's where he later claims he found it. And like, if you're running away, would you not want to bring that with you so you can actually have something to live off? She would have to not take this envelope that was in her own desk with $750 cash, even though she was planning on running away and would need cash. Okay. She would also have to not be seen on security footage in the office because there was no footage of her in the office in that period of time, and not be seen on security cameras doing any of that driving to and from or the walking in between. She'd have to not be seen on security cameras. Why would she want to hide that? Oh, and also not pick up a custom ring she was having made for like $7,000, which had been ready since the previous Thursday, that she had already paid for. And never contact any of her children again, any of her friends. Remember, this is a very outgoing person. She was extroverted. She loved connecting with people. Wouldn't she want to be in contact with her family and friends about that big conversation she was going to be having with Dale that night? She was so close with her kids. She had 6 grandkids, which she loved to death. Like, she wouldn't... It doesn't make sense, not in this situation anyway. The only potential for this to even make sense is if Dale threatened her, like didn't do anything to her, but threatened her to get out of Dodge, otherwise he would harm her or kill her. But then still none of the other stuff with like the going back and forth from the office, like her not being on camera, like none of that makes sense still. The logistics don't logist. If Dee ran away, like Dale said, what method of transport was she using? Because she didn't leave on foot, she didn't take one of their cars, nobody came to pick her up, and even if she did get out of their property without being seen, her passport wasn't used, there's no record of it being used, there's no record of her crossing a border, and there's never been any confirmed sightings of Dee anywhere in the world. And again, if she did run away, how would she have supported herself financially? She didn't have the $50,000 wedding ring, she didn't have the $7,000 that she had just paid for a ring that she never even got, the $750 in cash, which by the way, Dale didn't know about that envelope. And there's also been no bank account activity, no credit card activity since she disappeared. So how would she even survive? I guess actually that fits pretty nicely into Dale's theory about her running away with a rich man. At one point, Dale's attorney provided a statement for Dale saying that he really misses his wife, he had nothing to do with her disappearance, and he's been cooperating with police officers. And they end that statement by saying that he is eagerly awaiting Dee's return. He can't wait to see her alive and well. I don't know, this just kind of seems like a formality to me. Alright, I want to get into the whole timeline here of how everything works. And when I say timeline, I mean the timeline of what we know for sure. What's fact? What's like proven with evidence, camera evidence, texts, etc. Starting about a month before Dee's disappearance, Dale told somebody he was going to kill Dee. That's kind of all we know before the fact. So let's just bring it right up to the 24th of April, 2021, okay? At 7 p.m, Dale arrives home. 7:42 p.m, the family friend arrives to pick up Angelina. 8:34 p.m, Dale notices someone, who actually ends up being his own son, on his property, and he runs him off the property, basically saying like, get off my lawn, like intimidating him, telling him to leave. And his son's presence has never ever been a problem before on his property, so why would it be a problem now on this night that you're gonna have this big conversation and Dee's gonna tell you that she's divorcing you and suddenly Dee is never seen again? Like, why would you want somebody to leave your property at that time? At 10:24 p.m. then, a friend texted Dee, checking in with her basically. She said, how are you? Dee replied about a half an hour later, just with one letter, K. This was very, very, very unusual for Dee because she was such a chatterbox. Like, she wanted to talk, she wanted to be in communication with people, and not once had she ever replied to anyone just using K. And just a few minutes later, the Wi-Fi on Dee's phone was switched off. Then at 2:30 a.m, it goes completely silent forever. Then at 3 a.m, okay, you're not going to believe this. It is known that Dale leaves the house at 3 a.m. Who leaves the house at 3 a.m? Why would you need to do that? And he doesn't return home until 4:30 a.m. And I'll admit, this was one of those things where once I heard this information, I was like, okay, but how do we know? Like, is there CCTV? Is there a witness? Is there, like, what's the evidence that backs this up? Because it seems a little too convenient. And essentially, it hasn't actually been released as to how we know, but the general consensus is, oh, we know. Later, it's revealed then at 3:55 a.m, he was at his dad's house, getting keys to a barn that is filled with chemicals and equipment. Me sideways. I would love to know what he was doing there. So then we know he gets back at 4:30 a.m. and things are apparently normal. 6 a.m, we know he leaves the house again. Well, apparently, according to Dale, he leaves the house at 6 a.m. and so on and so forth. Oh, and by the way, Dale's attorney came out to say that according to the data from Dale's Apple Watch, his heart rate was stable all night. It didn't show any signs of stress. That would have been like, oh, interesting, because if he was like killing somebody or having an argument, a big heightened physical or violent argument, like, yeah, your heart rate would go up. But it later came out that this wasn't a valid reading because his Apple Watch wasn't even synced to his phone at that time. And on the 25th then, we know that she was reported missing and the searches began. And another little interesting nugget for you, on the 26th of April, Dale secretly met with a guy to change the passwords on the security cameras and manipulate the security cameras. Why feel the need to do this when your wife has just gone missing? Shouldn't you be out looking for her? Shouldn't you be out like asking people if they've seen her, or just actually physically searching? Maybe you can just answer that one in the comments. And that same day, he starts looking into lawyers. But again, why? Your wife is only missing. Like, you're not guilty of anything. Or are you? Okay, into the investigation then. Investigators as well looked through the security footage of the property and surrounding areas, but honestly, again, there really was nothing that jumped out. In late October 2021, a lot of searches were conducted of Dee and Dale's property, but there was still no sign of Dee. And let it be known that yes, Dale did consent to letting them search the property, but after an hour and a half of them searching, he got fed up with it and he said, no, you're done, get off my property. So they had to go off and get a search warrant, and then they came back with the search warrant with cadaver dogs, and as they were searching, they started moving towards this barn that he had, which held a fertilizer. He noticed they were going towards this barn. He said, no, don't go in there, there's a fertilizer, it'll kill the dogs. And they go ahead and take his word for that, and this barn was never searched. Some people theorize that he was composting evidence of some kind. Do with that what you will. But in March of 2022 then, a task force was put together with the Michigan State Police and the FBI. And this is when the investigation was taken up a notch. They conducted searches on foot, by air, with dogs. They did forensic searches. They looked into Dee's medical records as well as her finances and her social media. And also every single person that was connected to Dee in any way underwent a polygraph test. Except for one person, Dale. He refused, so he didn't do one. And another thing about Dale, just while we're bringing him up, is, and this is completely mental, right? You decide whether it's relevant or not. But right at the time of Dee's disappearance, Dale burned his fingerprints off. Burned them off. Now, I'm sure it wasn't intentional, or maybe it was, who knows. But they were burned to the point where he couldn't even open his iPad anymore because he would use his thumbprint and his thumbprint was gone. So let's look at this now for a little sec. How could you burn off your fingerprints? Fire? Maybe he was burning something. Maybe he was using chemicals for something. Drop a comment below if you have any other suggestions as to how this might have happened. I wouldn't be very familiar with all that kind of stuff. But more importantly than how, why would this happen? Why would he be handling fire? Why would he be handling chemicals? To be honest, I don't think it had anything to do with fire because people knew about Dee's disappearance really early on and he wouldn't have had time to burn anything, I don't think, especially not entire remains or anything like that. He's known to have visited his dad's chemical barn at 3:55 a.m. on the night of Dee's disappearance. He had access to plenty of very intense chemicals. Chemicals like this could definitely help somebody destroy evidence. That's what I'm leaning towards here, but feel free to call me out if you think I'm way off. Now, there's more to Dee and Dale's relationship that I think you should know about. I've told you it was tumultuous. I've told you it wasn't exactly the happiest relationship. But what does that really mean? There are multiple people who have come forward, say that they've witnessed not just the emotionally charged, very intense arguments, but they've witnessed violence between Dale and Dee. People had been aware of bruising on Dee's body and bumps on her head and things like that. Dale had even been seen trying to choke her in the past. People literally witnessed that with their own eyeballs. And Dale's temper is said to be explosive. Like, he can really take it from calm 1 second to about to explode the next second. If everything I've already said wasn't already enough for you, it gets worse, apparently. And he also had this element of control and stalking over Dee. Police found a tracker on Dee's car, which Dale was using to keep tabs on her location. Also, Raquel, remember Dee's daughter, she remembers something about her last conversation with Dee. Dee would watch Dateline every night. So obviously it's all about crime and domestic violence and like all of these kind of things. And she said to Raquel that Dale could do something like that to her. She literally predicted it. This was not a random disappearance. This was not a random crime. It is very clear what's actually gone on here. And then there's even more, because Dale would ring Dee multiple times a day. He was constantly checking in on her, not in a hello my love kind of way, but in a very controlling way. In the days leading up to her disappearance, the call log went like this, okay? On the 17th, 8 calls. The 18th, 5 calls. The 19th, 5 calls. The 20th, 3 calls. The 21st, 9 calls. 22nd, 10 calls. 24th, 7 calls. 25th, 0 calls. 26th, 0 calls. Because the f***er knows he's not getting a response from her. You're keeping tabs on her location and what she's up to every hour of the day. And suddenly she's gone missing and you don't care where she is. And look, I know I'm piling everything up on Dale right now, but that wasn't even my intention. Because I really do like to play devil's advocate. I like to look at all the different possibilities. But the facts are there. He's made it extremely difficult not to be very, very suspicious of him. Now, there is another character at play in this case, because Dale had this little friend called Todd Nayrink. And to be honest, I don't even fully understand Todd's involvement, okay? But he's literally on audio saying, I'm involved like a mother right up to my ears. He was like a trucker or delivery guy or something. I think he worked with Dale. And in his digital log from the night of Dee's disappearance, there was a login in this log with different login credentials. Now, what exactly that insinuates, I don't know. Like, I wish I had the answers for you. Does that mean it was actually somebody else who logged in the digital log and like used the truck? I don't know. I mean, it seems to have something to do with Dee's disappearance, because Todd was literally at Dee and Dale's property on that night. He was allowed there, but Dale's own son was run off the property by Dale. Like, I really wish I had more clarity and more answers for you to share there, but as of right now, I have no choice but to leave you and myself, to be honest, in the dark. And it's also important to be aware of Todd, because Todd's first cousin is romantically involved with the lead detective on Dee's case, Kevin Greca. Should this be allowed? No, this is a huge conflict of interest. And apparently this detective is super comfortable just going off blabbing to this person, that person, and definitely his girlfriend, aka Todd's first cousin, about the case. The lead detective, not even just like some random officer who's working on the case. This guy is leading the investigation. I mean, thank God the FBI got involved. At least that's something. Unfortunately, there were actually quite a few issues with the local police in this case. They seem to have massive egos and they won't accept help from anyone, and they really just don't take their leads that seriously. All of this stuff that could literally already have the case solved. In fact, like I said at the beginning, this is not the first case I've covered that's based in Lenawee County, Michigan. Do the Skelton brothers ring a bell for you? Where 3 young boys went missing on Thanksgiving 2010 and they were never seen again. There's been no arrests in the case, even though somebody looks really bad in that case as well. I'll put it up in the cards. I'd recommend opening that video in another tab and watching it after this one, because that case. All right, listen. We see so many cases where it's like, oh, it had to be the husband. And I mean, statistically, yeah, it kind of does lean that way. But nobody would murder another person without a motive, right? So what is a potential motive here? We cannot ignore their financial situation. We know Dee had multiple businesses, yeah? And one of her businesses she was 100% the owner of. That was her trucking business, which was actually supporting Dale's failing business, by the way. And the business that they shared, they owned 50% each. So it can't be a coincidence that the night she's gonna tell him she's divorcing him, it just becomes so that can't happen. Because without her, if they actually went through with divorce, Dale would be f***ed. He would be so f***ed. And after that, he just made all of these really sketchy money moves. On the 9th of August 2021, like 4 months after Dee disappeared, he created a new company called DDW Transportation. He's obviously 100% owner of this company. Bear in mind, the company that he owned with Dee was DDW Investments. He then transfers assets out of DDW Investments into DDW Transportation, and then in June 2022 he sells that business, and I'm sure he made a pretty penny. Oh my god, how is that not being looked at? How is that not like immediately police get your ass in here? On another occasion, he even attempted to use a forged document to transfer Dee's assets over to him, and he's just done so many things that just give off serious red flags. I'm sure there's a paper trail that could have him locked up. I'm sure of it. Well, actually, speaking of, in January 2023, he had a criminal contempt hearing for the following, okay? Converting assets from Dee's business, failing to disclose financial records, tax evasion, and a few other financial crimes related to this whole situation. There's not a whole lot of updates yet, but the next hearing will be on the 6th and 12th of June. So I know this is a very unsatisfying one to just leave off, but that's all the information I have for you. Something to be aware of though is that Dee's family are actually petitioning to have her legally declared dead because they want to file a wrongful death suit against Dale. But in order to do that legally, there has to be a death first. But it's complicated too because once she's declared dead, Dale might inherit Dee's estate because he's still legally married to her. But her family are well prepared for that fight. And her family, although heartbroken about Dee's disappearance and assumed murder, they are doing everything in their power to get justice for Dee and to get answers. Something tells me more is going to come out on this case. There is a $50,000 reward, so that's something. And if you're in or near this area, please share this video because maybe someone will have the information that can put this right. Thank you so much for watching this video. You have been amazing to get to this point. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do so and follow me at KatePhilpott_YT on TikTok and Instagram. You are an absolute legend. I love you so much for being here, and make sure you watch the Skelton Brothers case next because it will blow your mind and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Hopefully I should be back on regular scheduling after this video. So thanks for being here and I'll see you soon. Bye guys.